Did you not expect that they would level Gaza? Of course they're gonna level Gaza. And I'm disgusted by the 500 Palestinian children that are dead now and way more to come.
How much does the Israeli government want? How many people need to die for Netanyahu to feel good about himself? When you intentionally starve an entire population of people, when you engage in the collective punishment of an entire population of people, what is that called exactly? Israeli officials have made clear that absolutely no humanitarian aid will enter the Gaza Strip unless the Hamas militants who kidnapped Israelis release those hostages. In a statement, Israel Katz, the Israeli energy minister, said the following: "Not a single electricity switch will be flipped on, not a single faucet will be turned on, and not a single fuel truck will enter until the Israeli hostages are returned home." And what that means is that the fate of millions of Palestinians lies in the hands of these terrorists, these Hamas militants, who are so savage and so brutal that they had no problem murdering over 1,000 civilians over the weekend, including literal babies. And I'm terrified for the Palestinian civilians who are now suffering as a result. This is a serious humanitarian crisis. They have nowhere to go, nowhere to flee. Their neighborhoods are being leveled. Airstrikes are constant. Israel is employing this tactic of leveling entire neighborhoods rather than just individual buildings. And Palestinians say they're unable to escape and have nowhere to go, and that entire families have been crushed under the rubble as a result of those airstrikes. On Wednesday, Gaza's only power station ran out of fuel and shut down, leaving only lights powered by scattered private generators. International aid groups warned of a worsening humanitarian crisis after Israel halted deliveries of food, water, fuel, and electricity to Gaza's 2.3 million people and prevented entry of supplies from Egypt. The war has claimed at least 2,700 lives on both sides. In fact, in Gaza alone, 1,500 people have been reported dead, with about 500 of them being children. I have more details for you, including the disastrous fate of the hospitals in Gaza in just a moment. Cenk, I'd like you to jump in.
Yeah, so look, my take on it is that it lies in two different sets of hands. So yes, Hamas can turn over the hostages and then presumably solve at least the electricity problem that Israel's spending. But of course, just as a matter of fact, it is also in Israeli hands. And the Israeli government is the one making the decision to cut off the electricity. Now you could say they're justified. That's a question up for debate. I don't think it's justified, and I'll tell you why. If I have a family member that was kidnapped by Hamas and is in one of those tunnels, I would be both incredibly scared and enraged, and I would not want to have a conversation about Palestinians and innocent lives and this and that. I would want them to cut off the electricity. So I'm being honest with you, okay? But governments shouldn't run like enraged family members, because then you're going to make a lot of vicious decisions that affect tons of innocent lives. So we've condemned Hamas's brutal acts inside Israel very forcefully throughout here on this show, including the killing of children and babies. So now 500 Palestinian children are dead. How much bloodletting is enough? So if you're saying vengeance justifies the killing of these Palestinians, including their children, okay, I guess you could debate that. But I would come out on the side of don't do that. Why did we all get enraged at Hamas? Why were we so angry at them? Because their actions led to these, and directly, they killed these innocent civilians. So if Israel says, yeah, we're gonna cut off electricity knowing that it's gonna kill all these people, we're leveling these blocks, we're giving some warnings, and some folks are saying, well, you cut off all the power, nobody's hearing the warnings. Again, you could debate the facts around that, but Israel's making a decision. Yes, we are going to punish not just Hamas, and they are going to, every Hamas member that crossed over into Israel is the most fair game you've ever seen in your life. Those are at best case scenario, if you don't want to call them terrorists and you want to call them soldiers, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, if soldiers invade your area or terrorists invade your area, you get to kill them all. Okay, so that is not in dispute at all. They're targeting some Hamas leaders. Of course, they're going to target Hamas leaders. Perfectly reasonable and within normal, actions within a war. The question is, where do you draw the line? So Hamas lost any kind of, Hamas never had any moral high ground, but on behalf of Palestinians, they lost the moral high ground, and it was despicable the way they did it. So now apparently Netanyahu's government says, oh yeah, I'm gonna lose the moral high ground just as much as you, or more than you, or less than you. You could debate what the relative actions are, and Hamas started it, no one debates that. Killing all those people isn't gonna help. Here, I'm gonna give you a quote that to me struck me the most. So this is from Associated Press News, but they're quoting the Red Cross here, as you'll see. Without electricity, hospitals risk turning into morgues, said Fabrizio Carboni, regional director of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Newborn incubators, kidney dialysis machines, x-rays, and more are all dependent on power, he said. No, the government cannot do that. You can't do that. And so they're gonna do it. And you say, oh, well, then Hamas should give over the case. Yes, but Hamas, you all say are terrorists, right? And what they did was terrorism when they killed those civilians, no question, right? So we're gonna leave the decision in the hands of terrorists, or are we going to be better than them? And I would ask Israel to be better than them. And you can say, oh, I can't believe you're even having this discussion. No, I am having this discussion. I am having it because do not counter with equal or more viciousness. Maybe you think morally speaking, you have a right to, but I'm asking you not to, because when you kill their children, this isn't going to solve the situation at all.
Yeah, I agree on that 100%. I have no problem with them targeting Hamas. I do believe that Hamas is a terrorist organization. I do believe that what they committed over the weekend in terms of their torture and murder and maiming of Israeli citizens and innocent civilians in Israel was absolutely disgusting, and they should suffer the consequences of that. But we're talking about a population of people in Gaza, half of whom are under the age of 18. These are not individuals who asked for this. These are not individuals who carried out terrorist attacks themselves. These are innocent civilians who are trying to live their lives in an untenable situation. And I wanna go to the video showing scenes of what Gazans are dealing with right now as we speak. It is just absolutely tragic. It's difficult to watch, so I wanna give that warning. But here is what it is like to be a Palestinian stuck in the Gaza Strip.
The Gaza City neighborhood, once known as El Rimel, the Sands, reduced to ashes. Its residents retrieve what they can, which isn't much. Israel continues to pound the strip, targeting, it says, Hamas infrastructure. Residents in shock are asking why. I got married this year, says Yahya Lahwel. What did I do? What have we done? You destroyed an entire neighborhood. He says he never fired a rocket. In this one of the most densely populated patches of land on Earth, bombs crashing into crowded neighborhoods rarely differentiate between fighter and civilian. The death toll rises by the hour. While Gaza's hospitals are overwhelmed with the wounded, around 40% of the population of Gaza is under the age of 15, according to the CIA. The Information Ministry in Gaza reports that nearly 170 buildings have been destroyed and more than 12,000 residences damaged.
And I think that Hamas's unwillingness to release the hostages not only shows their brutality toward Israeli civilians, but also their brutality toward Palestinians, knowing full well that this is going to continue happening and people will continue to be killed, brutalized as a result of their actions, but they don't care.
Yeah, so this is among the reasons why I said that Hamas was monstrous idiots. They have no plan, they have no end game, they have no strategy. It was just rage and murder and mayhem. And I said days ago that, and what's it gonna happen? You killed Israeli civilians in a grotesque way, and now they're gonna kill tons and tons and tons of Palestinians. So did you think that that wasn't going to happen? So what was your plan now? So Israel says they took out a bunch of the leadership, including one elite, force for Hamas, if such a thing exists, and maybe a naval commander. Like, I suppose you expected, but didn't you not expect that they would level Gaza? Of course they're gonna level Gaza. So now you could say, hey, Cenk, it's not, of course they shouldn't. I just told you they shouldn't, right? But they're going to, and every rational person knew they were going to. So, look, guys, it's super easy to blame Hamas, and we just did it 10,000 times over. And yes, they started this, and all that responsibility is on them. But that doesn't mean that Israel doesn't have any responsibility. And you just saw that rubble there. Yes, they didn't start it, but just saying, okay, you started it, so now we're gonna kill however many more of you. That's not what a government should do. I know a lot of governments do it. Our government did a lot of that on 9/11, and we killed the wrong people in Iraq, let alone the right people, let alone civilians instead of soldiers. I understand that, but we spoke out against that. We speak out against Hamas, and now we're in a situation we're gonna have to speak out against this brutality. And by the way, let's just acknowledge things that are super obvious. Look at why can Israel do this to Gaza with no repercussions, no brakes in the car, no nothing. Because of the occupation. The idea that Israel handed over Gaza Strip is absurd. I'm sorry, but I can't stomach that. It's not a thing that actually happened. People have to stop saying it. They don't control their borders at all. Then Netanyahu comes in and says, well, if you don't like it, you should leave. Great, yes, they would like to leave. 15% have packed up their bags and they're going stuffed into UN facilities within Gaza. But they can't leave. They don't control their own borders. They can't go into Israel. They can't go into Egypt. There is no leaving. And then, okay, well then how are they just cutting off the electricity? Well, so the Palestinians don't control their own electricity. They don't control their own fuel, their medicine, etc. You know why? Because they're occupied. There is an occupying force that controls them completely. Please don't deny reality. That's the reality, and that's why you're seeing total unlimited damage in Gaza. You saw it with your own eyes.
But let me ask you a question, Cenk, because prior to what Hamas did over the weekend, I would have agreed with you 1,000%. However, you have to understand the perspective of Israelis when Hamas has control of the Gaza Strip, knowing full well how brutal and savage they are and how willing they are to kill literal children, literal civilians who did nothing wrong. And people try to argue, no, they're not civilians. Some of these people are settlers, and so they're part of the problem. Anyone making that argument is so incredibly ignorant and hateful. Don't even bring that BS to me, okay? But when you see the kind of threat that Hamas poses to the civilian population in Israel, you can understand that perspective of fear.
Oh, of course I understand the fear.
So like, what is the solution? Because I understand where they're coming from, but I also don't want Palestinians to be brutalized like this.
Yeah, I know what the solution is. Ben and I talked about it on the first day here. And so look, you can say it's not easy, but I actually think it is easy. And I know that sounds outrageous, but I'll tell you why in a second. Okay, so first though, I have to distinguish a couple of things. So everyone is human. I wish no one would ever get killed in a situation like this, including the soldiers. A lot of the soldiers for the Israelis are young kids, pulled out of their house, get drafted, you gotta go, okay? A lot of the people dying in Gaza Strip are kids. And by the way, if they're 17, 18, they're part of the fighting, well, hey, you attacked Israel, you had it coming, but they're still 17, 18. Settlers, I think what the settlers are doing inside the Gaza Strip and the West Bank is disgusting. So
my understanding is they pulled settlers out of the Gaza Strip forcibly, okay?
Yeah, good.
And that there are settlers, yes, that is a huge problem when it comes to the West Bank. That is a problem with the West Bank.
Yeah.
But the settler argument in the context of the Gaza conflict makes absolutely no sense.
Okay, so look, what I was getting to is, it doesn't mean you get to kill settlers. They're still human beings, okay? Now, not that being said, also a different fact is, today there's a story about how the settlers, they killed 3 Palestinians. And then when the Palestinian families went to the funerals, the settlers pulled over the funeral procession and killed the people going to the funerals. So There's no end to this. There's no end to the hatred. And so is Hamas vicious? Of course. Look, again, everybody get upset if you want, but fundamentalism drives this. Normal people that grew up in a normal secular culture don't go around killing babies. You have to brainwash them into not regular religion, fundamentalist religion, and tell them that God wants you to murder babies. That's the only way that it happens. So yes, Hamas is out of control in that it is led by fundamentalists. The settlers, totally out of control, led by fundamentalists. And if you're getting like, oh no, but the settlers are just stealing land and murdering Palestinians, it's not that big a deal. You're wrong, it's a giant deal. It's a cancer that's causing this problem in the first place. So, okay. Now, we've apportioned gigantic blame to everyone who deserves the blame. So how the hell do we solve it? Oh, one last piece of blame. Stop saying, I will not accept this argument under any circumstances. The Palestinians had it coming. There is no Palestinians. Not every Palestinian, a 3-year-old didn't sign up to be part of Hamas. Because if you use that logic, just please think about it for 1 second. If you use that logic and go, oh yeah, but they voted for Hamas. Israel voted for Netanyahu. Under that logic, Hamas goes, oh, the Israelis had it coming. The civilians should be murdered for voting for Netanyahu. That is terrible logic. I hate that logic. All that logic leads to, it's not even logic. All that leads to is killing more innocent civilians. All right, so what's the solution? And as I said on Monday, withdraw from the occupied territories, build the largest walls humans have ever built, make the Great Wall in China look like child's play. And then if at that point, Hamas, Fatah, any Palestinian government, you cross over to Israel, then you have attacked a foreign country, and they have every right to attack you back in whichever way that they like. But right now, the Palestinians don't have a country. They're completely and utterly vulnerable, defenseless, imprisoned, with no rights, no control over their own territory. So I would reverse the question. I have an answer, 1967 borders and giant walls. I have an answer. By the way, about a decade ago or longer, they negotiated a compromise that was past the 1967 borders. The Palestinians looked like that they were ready to accept that. And Hamas even indicated behind the scenes that they would withdraw that dumb, stupid thing that they have in their charter about how Israel's not allowed to exist. Really, Hamas, how's that working out for you? Anyways, so whether you think it's the Palestinians or the Israelis' fault for not accepting that peace agreement that was nearly done exists. They could put that into effect today. If I was Israel, I would not be unfair. Now, I'm not talking about the war, in terms of the peace. I would take a peace deal that was slightly in favor of the Palestinians and then just do it unilaterally. By the way, the Palestinians don't want that. They say, oh, no, we need to have negotiations. How's your negotiations working out? Do it unilaterally, but be super fair. Then you sit on the moral high ground forever and ever and ever, okay? But now with the occupation and now what you're doing to Gaza, there goes the moral high ground. You had it, and then at a moment where you are wrecked with grief, if you can rise above that, that is when you become historic, and that is when the world cherishes you. But that is not what's, and I get it. Human reaction is, you killed mine, I can't wait to kill yours. I understand that, but I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if finally one side rose above it? And right now they're not. And so I will condemn Hamas from here to eternity for what they did. But it makes the occupation no better at all. It's still the core of the problem. You cannot occupy people for 56 years, control their lives 100%. And then go, golly gee, hey, is it a problem? Yes, it's a problem. And if you say, no, you're not allowed to talk about it the day after, okay, I hear you, I said it. Like, hey, what is not time to talk about apartheid, et cetera, the day after. But when do we get to talk about it? Do we have to wait 2 years? This is the same thing that happened at MSNBC with me. I was gonna criticize Obama. They said, don't do it, you have to wait a week. Until it's out of the news cycle. And the occupation continues on mercilessly to the end of time. It's incumbent upon Israel to come up with a plan to end the occupation. If you're the occupying force, it is your moral duty to end the occupation. If you do not, then you lose the moral high ground and you don't get Okay, everyone here is bad guys, but go ahead, keep killing each other. See how it turns out for you. I'm disgusted by those poor kids dead in Israel. A baby stroller by a car, they mowed it down. Families killed in the kibbutz. I mean, God knows what they did to women, etc. And I'm disgusted by the 500 Palestinian children that are dead now, and way more to come. And when a government like Israel says, we will cut off all of your fuel, and if you got kids on incubators and you got grandmothers on life support, they're all gonna die and we don't care. That's not what a decent government is supposed to do.
They then go on to talk about how they've been urging Gazans to flee northern Gaza and head south. That's similar to what we heard yesterday in their statement. They don't really acknowledge the civilian casualties here, but reiterate their position and their call for civilians to head south. So this is the second strike on the Jabalia refugee camp in less than 24 hours.
Israel has now officially confirmed that the Israeli Defense Forces have bombed the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza for the second time. So I just want to back up for a second and remind you all that after they bombed that refugee camp, I should say refugee camp the first time, killing at least 50 civilians, they got a lot of backlash for it. But when you have the country with the most powerful military to back you up in everything and anything you want to do, you're not really gonna care about that international backlash. You're not gonna care about what the UN has to say about the high civilian death toll. You're gonna go ahead and bomb it the second time. Israeli airstrikes also hit the vicinity of the Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City, where doctors say up to 14,000 displaced people are sheltering, according to the director of the hospital. The strikes that began Wednesday evening continued into Thursday morning, and we're getting closer to the hospital, according to Dr. Bashir Murad. The civil defense in Hamas-run Gaza described the strike as a second massacre. The airstrike killed at least 80 people and injured hundreds more, according to a doctor, Dr. Atef Al-Kulut, the director of Gaza's Indonesian hospital. He told CNN more bodies were being dug out of the rubble, and the majority of casualties were women and children. In fact, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the names of the individuals who have died as a result of these airstrikes and the bombardment by the IDF in Gaza, you'll notice that somewhere between 65 to 70% of the civilians killed are women, children, and elderly people. So I don't know, I mean, that's a lot of civilian death. About 9,000 civilians have died already. The number is actually likely higher than that. And I don't know, Waz, do you think that Israelis are finally feeling safe? Are there enough deaths in the Gaza Strip to make them feel safe? Enough refugee camps bombed? Enough hospitals bombed? I don't know, tell me.
It's hard to talk about because this isn't, again, they're not gonna get some military victory out of this. Essentially what they're doing right now is collecting scalps. They put a certain amount of dead bodies on us. We're gonna inflict this, more dead bodies on them. That's what seems to be the animating logic, because again, they don't have intel on Hamas or their whereabouts. If they did, the attack would have never been able to be planned and executed in the way that it was in the first place. Like, the reason why Hamas was able to do this because they forgot about these guys. They forgot about the crisis that was happening in Gaza. And so these guys were able to do this. So this idea that these attacks are aimed at quote unquote destroying Hamas is absurd. There's nothing targeted about this. They have no information or intel. They're just bombing stuff indiscriminately. That's just obviously what's happening. They're committing war crimes. These are atrocities. Of course, is being compounded by the lack of, humanitarian aid that's being allowed to be sent into Gaza. And so, yeah, I would hope that people in Israel feel safer, feel like they're being made safer by this. At least that could be something that was justifying this stuff. But I mean, if you think about this in even kind of logical way, you can't think the outcome of this is going to be that the people of Gaza are gonna become less radicalized. That they're gonna become
That is a great point. And look,
docile.
I mean, listen, I want to be very clear that this is not, Palestinians are in no way distinct from other human beings. Okay, so I'm gonna put it in my context. So people understand what I'm saying. If any government entity, if any military killed every member of my family, what do I have to live for at that point? I don't care if I live or die, but I know I'm angry and I know I want revenge. And so what the IDF is currently doing in Gaza is basically manufacturing more extremism. I mean, they're getting their retaliation, they want their pound of flesh. They're getting that pound of flesh, but if they think that this is somehow going to root out extremism, they would be mistaken, especially when you consider the leadership of Hamas is not in the Gaza Strip. The leadership of Hamas is in Qatar. So rather than, hey, making a deal with Qatar to get those disgusting Hamas terrorists out of there and bring them to justice, they're just carrying out retaliation against ordinary people. And I gotta say one other thing, okay? There have been some people who have responded to my reporting on this story to say that Palestinian civilians and Hamas militants are one of the same. They're the same. Okay, yeah. The people who believe that are barbaric and they carry out barbaric actions. And I have absolutely no interest in hearing anything they have to say. That kind of justification of the brutality and the murders that are currently taking place. I mean, really, you want to talk, let's talk about little children who should be in school, little children who don't even understand what this war is about. Those little children are the same as Hamas terrorist militants? No, I mean like the effort, the very aggressive effort to dehumanize these people is so disgusting and so difficult in regard to like avoiding being blackpilled by all of this, really. Like you see a side of humanity that is so cruel and so vicious. I try to put it out of my mind and pretend like it doesn't exist. It exists, and it's the same feeling I got, Waz, when I saw some of the justifications toward what Hamas did to innocent Israeli civilians. What the hell is wrong with people? I don't understand. I don't understand any of it. I don't. And it gets worse. Every day it gets worse. Look, an hour or so before we came on air, CNN was reporting that in the north of the Gaza Strip, the IDF had actually intensified their airstrikes, intensified them. Now keep in mind, a lot of Palestinians can't just evacuate and flee. Where are they gonna go? And you want them to go to the south? They're bombing the south too. There is no part of the Gaza Strip where civilians are safe. And then they turn around, they point to, oh look, polls show that 80% of Palestinian civilians favor Hamas, while acknowledging that Hamas is a terrorist group. So let me understand something. If you are living under terrorist rule and you know that these individuals have no problem murdering you if you say or do anything they disagree with, are you really gonna respond to that poll by saying that, no, I do not favor Hamas? By the way, I'm wondering what happened to the 20% of people who had the courage to say that they were against Hamas in that poll. No, it's just any excuse to dehumanize, any excuse to justify what very clearly, what very obviously is happening in the Gaza Strip. It is ethnic cleansing. There is documentation proving it, okay? The IDF, the Israeli government, I should say, confirmed documents showing that one of their plans, one of their strategies was to essentially push the remaining Palestinian civilians, likely millions of people. I mean, who knows when the air raids are gonna be done? Who knows how many people will be left? But after that's over, they were planning on pushing them into Egypt. Get them out of the land, get them out. Just completely displacing millions of people. And we're supposed to sit back and say, that's totally fine, we co-sign. In fact, here's our hard-earned taxpayer money to fund it. Here are weapons to carry out this brutality. I just don't understand how anyone can justify what is happening right now. You have to have a certain level of just reckless disregard for human life to look at what's happening in the Gaza Strip right now, look at the number of literal children dying and say, no, this is totally fine. This is totally fine. I mean, it's definitely not gonna lead to peace. It's definitely gonna lead to more extremism. In the long run, it's not gonna keep Israeli civilians safe. But we really wanted retaliation. So we're gonna justify this and we're gonna watch all these babies get killed because it makes us feel good. Sorry, I know that was a bit of a rant. I blacked out a little bit. I can't. I mean, day after day, the barbarism, the brutality, the deaths. Like, I'm supposed to come here and be hushed tones. Like, let me speak as if I'm on NPR, as if this isn't the most unjust military action I've witnessed in my lifetime. 9,000 people gone. Mohammed al-Aswad, who's a Palestinian, told CNN the following. This is after the second bombing of the refugee camp. Children were carrying other injured children and running. With gray dust filling the air, bodies were hanging on the rubble, many of them unrecognizable. Some were bleeding and others were burnt. And there's all sorts of pro-Israel conspiracy theories floating around on Twitter. I'm sure some of you have noticed them, alleging that Palestinians are faking their deaths. What is it? You don't want to accept what you're co-signing onto? You don't want to accept the fact that you're totally fine with these deaths, so you're gonna pretend like these deaths are faked? No, they're real. They're definitely real. And you enjoy it, so just tell the world who you really are. Why are you trying to hide it? Why are you trying to conceal it? What I'm not okay with is that as an American, because of our government and how they will greenlight anything Israel wants to do, these people are dying in our name, with our money, with our weapons. And I'm supposed to sit here and be okay with it.
I mean, I think just for context, for people at home to get an understanding, in the first week of the aerial bombardment, I think Israel dropped about 6,000 tonnage of bombs on the Gaza Strip. Just for context, folks, not one single year of the American war in Afghanistan did we do that, right? So in 1 week, they dropped more bombs on Gaza than in any single year the US military did on Afghanistan, which, ostensibly, allegedly was in response to 9/11. You've heard the rhetoric that this is Israel's 9/11. Just for context of the brutality here. And another point I would like for people to understand is this concept that Israel has to quote unquote defend itself. Essentially, this is a retaliatory act, and so it's justified. And what I would say to that is that if you talk to any single member of Hamas, I would venture a guess, I wouldn't know. But if you talk to any Palestinian about what Hamas did on October 7th, they would say that's in retaliation to the occupation. That's in retaliation to the suffering, the hunger, the brutality of the occupation. And they would say that it was justified because of that.
Like and this idea that it wasn't, sorry.
And it wasn't, and that's the point. So this idea that if you're when you're in retaliation of something, you can be indiscriminate in the people who you harm and kill and maim, be they babies, elderly people, women, you name it. That doesn't make any sense. And another thing, again, that folks should take into consideration, because again, I think the reason why we got this propaganda about Hamas beheading newborn babies on the internet and stuff like that, it's so that this behavior could be justified, right? I just want people to understand that these people who are being harmed right now, they don't have a voice, right? This idea that they should have voted Hamas out. There was a democratic election that was held in 2006. And Hamas stopped letting them conduct elections. Like they're not like this isn't some situation where they nominated these guys. There was a party platform that Hamas had, and they said, "Yo, we're gonna go out and indiscriminately kill a bunch of civilians and vote for us and we'll go out and implement that. That's not what happened here. And another thing is that it's not as if, again, how does somebody, an organization like Hamas even gain prominence? They were propped up by the Israeli government years ago, because back in those days, the Israelis wanted to undermine a way less militant, way less jihadist organization. They propped these dudes up, and now it came back to bite them. And most importantly, like what I would want everybody to understand, most importantly, Palestinian people have tried in the past, different organizations, to go about gaining their freedom by peaceful means. Protests, reaching out to other people in the world, other countries, human rights people, all of that stuff.
The UN? Mm-hmm.
The UN reached out to all of these people. These protesters, a lot of them got killed, a lot of them got jailed, they got crushed. So it's not like the behaviors of peace have ever been rewarded. They've never been incentivized. When they went about other means of trying to, strike a blow against the occupation, against the oppression, they got utterly crushed. And so we're talking about some of the most desperate people on planet Earth. Some crazies arise out of that and they do something completely heinous. And the idea is like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. This will make people happy. I don't understand the logic here.
I'm about to show you the kinds of regurgitated talking points that are doled out on corporate news day in and day out, meant to justify the brutality that we're seeing in Gaza. 9,000 people dead. I want you to think about how many people that is, with no end in sight. Tomorrow we'll come on the show and we'll tell you the number is now 10,000. And the next week, after the weekend, we'll come back and who knows, maybe it'll be 15,000. How much does the Israeli government want? How many people need to die for Netanyahu to feel good about himself? I'm very curious about that, because this is more than just a pound of flesh at this point. So Aaron Burnett has an IDF spokesperson. You may have seen him before. We've definitely showed some of his videos on the show. Asks him about the high civilian death toll, and you're about to hear the same boring nonsense talking points regurgitated to you once again. Let's go.
You should have evacuated, you and your family. You shouldn't have been there. That doesn't mean that we wanted to kill anybody. It just means that when we warned Palestinians 2 weeks ago to evacuate that specific area because there was going to be major combat operations, they should have heeded the warning and they should have left.
They should have left where exactly? They should have left to the south, where you guys are also doing bombardments and airstrikes? Is that where you want them to go? The IDF confirmed to the media that they're doing airstrikes in the south. So this ridiculous notion, by the way, even like logistically speaking, displacing 1 million people from half of the strip is just, it's untenable. They can't do it. And the IDF knows that it's untenable. They know. You think they're stupid? They know.
In Gaza itself, hospitals are overrun with the injured and the dead. The World Health Organization says almost all the hospitals in the Gaza Strip have now stopped functioning.
There's blood everywhere in these hospitals at the moment. We're seeing almost only trauma cases come through the door, and at a scale that's quite difficult to believe. It's a bloodbath, as we said before. It's carnage.
After raiding and bombing refugee camps in northern Gaza, the Israeli Defense Forces have now moved on to doing the same in central Gaza. And let's not pretend as though they're not also engaging in aerial bombardments in the south, where they had previously told Palestinians to evacuate to for safety. Now, Israel's offensive is one of the most devastating military campaigns in recent history. More than 20,900 Palestinians, 2/3 women and children have been killed, and that's according to the health ministry in Gaza. That is actually, despite what Israel will say, a very conservative estimate of the number of people who have perished in the Gaza Strip. It does not include the number of Palestinians who remain trapped under the rubble following aerial bombardments of the Gaza Strip, following aerial bombardments of residential buildings, of refugee camps, of hospitals, and more. Let me give you the rest of that graphic where the UN Human Rights Office said the continued bombardment of Middle Gaza had claimed more than 100 Palestinian lives since Christmas Eve. Now that number is very likely to have risen since the report came out by the Associated Press. But things have gotten worse for Palestinians struggling to stay alive. In fact, the Associated Press reports that residents in central Gaza described intense and lethal artillery shelling and airstrikes in refugee camps, including Nusrat, Maghazi, and Burej camps. Now, let's take a look at the next video, which will give you some more information about the attacks on these refugee camps and the number of civilians who have perished as a result.
At the Burej camp in central Gaza, these families are on the move again, heeding Israeli warnings to evacuate. But safety in Gaza is hard to find. Riyad Abdel Salam said even evacuating is dangerous.
They threw leaflets at us and told us to get out with our hands above our heads. They shot F-16 bullets and rounds of gunfire around us. We have been forced out.
The continued Israeli strikes hit even so-called safe zones. Mariam Al-Omsi has lived through decades of conflict.
75 years of suffering, our rights taken, our country seized, and our people slaughtered.
And as fighting in Gaza rages on, the death toll keeps rising. Mainly women and children, some so little and so stunned, they don't cry out in pain. Across Gaza, there's no shortage of pain. This boy cries out for a loved one and gives a final kiss goodbye.
The footage toward the end of that video absolutely broke me this morning. I don't know how anyone can see these scenes and think, no, this is totally justified. This is totally okay. And no place in the Gaza Strip is safe. As you heard in that video, they're also doing aerial bombardments of the south, and Israel has taken complete responsibility for that with absolutely no remorse. In an area Israel had declared a safe zone, a strike hit a home in Mawasi, a rural area in the southern province of Khan Yunis. One woman was killed and at least 8 were wounded, according to a cameraman working for the Associated Press at the nearby hospital. In response, Israel's military said that it wouldn't refrain from operating in safe zones if it identifies terrorist organization activity threatening the security of Israel. And according to Israel's far-right government, everyone in the Gaza Strip, every single Palestinian has been radicalized. So in their eyes, every single person living in the Gaza Strip is a target, is a threat to Israel's safety. And you're gonna hear from spokespeople from Netanyahu's government making that claim in just a moment. Now, many of the Palestinians being told to evacuate had already evacuated from the north to the south, hoping for safety, and that is not what they got. The Israeli military ordered residents to evacuate a belt of territory the width of central Gaza, urging them to move to nearby Deir al-Bala. The UN Humanitarian Office said the area ordered evacuated was home to nearly 90,000 people before the war, and now shelters more than 61,000 displaced people, mostly from the north. But again, as we know, even they're not safe, even though they went to this area for safety. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also continues to humiliate the American government as the Biden administration continues to claim that they are urging Netanyahu's government and the IDF to do something to minimize the number of civilian casualties and engage in more strategic and targeted strikes against Hamas. And the AP notes that Netanyahu continues to mock the United States on the international stage, essentially embarrassing our government, embarrassing the American people. Netanyahu said the military was deepening the fighting. The Washington Post reported similar statements from Netanyahu. The war isn't close to finished, Netanyahu said during a visit to Gaza Monday. We are expanding the fight in the coming days, he said in comments released by his Likud party. This will be a long battle. This coming from a prime minister who back in 2015 said, if you vote for me, if you keep me in office, I will prevent the formation of a Palestinian state. A statement that he repeated in recent weeks to the press. Isn't it so great that I prevented the formation of a Palestinian state? Now this further highlights the embarrassment that the United States has become on the world stage. And I don't say that with any glee. I don't say that as if it's something to be proud of. I'm embarrassed by it. I'm embarrassed that our government continues to fund their military operations, continues to provide the 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs that are terrorizing innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip. And I'm embarrassed that we have an incredibly weak, pathetic government that claims that they're urging Netanyahu to rein things in a little bit, but he refuses to do it, and we continue to support him. Now, Israel's lack of self-awareness was on full display during an exchange on CNN when an Israeli spokeswoman by the name of Tal Hendrik was challenged on the military operations and clear disregard for civilian lives. In years prior, it would be rare to see this kind of exchange on CNN, and I want to give the anchors here a lot of credit, especially Kilar, who's going to push back against some of the claims made by the spokeswoman. Let's watch.
This ideology is also very much rooted in the Palestinian society. They're raising generation after generation to believe that there's no hope and that there's so-called refugees of wars that they themselves started.
Look at the pictures coming out of Gaza. Tal, when you see those pictures coming out of Gaza, do you see why some people don't have hope looking at those pictures?
Well, we are in the middle of a war that Israel did not start and did not want. Well,
but it is prosecuting it, Tal. It is prosecuting it forcefully, and you see the pictures here.
First, Hamas must be gone, and then we hope that the Palestinian society will de-radicalize. And we can't have, what our troops are finding right now on the ground in certain neighborhoods in Gaza, pictures of children, women with guns, Hamas uniform tailored for children, and a Hamas terrorist that we have arrested just admitted on record.
Does that make the children justifiable enemies to you?
It does make them justifiable enemies to them. I mean, she hated the pushback and denied the claims that Israel sees the children as justifiable targets for their military operations, but actions speak louder than words. I mean, what do we call this when the IDF is bombing hospitals, making them inoperable? Okay, not a single hospital in the Gaza Strip right now has the functionality necessary to treat wounded patients. What exactly are we supposed to call this when they are intentionally and with zero remorse bombing refugee camps, knowing full well that those refugee camps have innocent civilians within it? Simply claiming, Hamas uses them as human shields isn't good enough to justify the airstrikes that they continue to do, the shelling that they continue to engage in. What exactly do we call it when a mother and daughter within a church are walking to a bathroom and they are shot and killed by Israeli snipers in the Gaza Strip? What exactly would we refer to that as? Were those two women, were the mother and daughter, were they allegedly Hamas militants? What exactly do we call that? What exactly are we supposed to say? It is pathetic, the number of people in this country and in the UK, to be quite frank, who provide cover for what the IDF is currently doing in the Gaza Strip. And then they have the audacity to claim that, all these Arab countries that are fired up about this, all these Arab countries who are concerned about Palestinian civilians, why don't they do the right thing and help Israel in their ethnic cleansing and take the refugees into their own countries? Why don't they absorb the refugees into their own countries? For any American making that claim, hey, the United States government loves to moan and groan about the treatment of Venezuelans in Venezuela. Why doesn't the United States government just absorb the Venezuelan refugees that we're so concerned about? Interesting, right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. But I would venture to say that Arab countries, first of all, don't have that responsibility and don't want to engage in assisting Israel with the ethnic cleansing that they want to carry out. But they are making the Gaza Strip unlivable when there's essentially no infrastructure left, no housing left, no hospitals left, no refugee camps left. When they're talking about pumping seawater into the tunnels, thus totally sacrificing what's left of the drinkable water in the Gaza Strip. How exactly is the Gaza Strip supposed to support human life? Could it be that we should maybe believe what the far right-wing government officials in Israel keep saying over and over again to the press in their country about how they want to level the Gaza Strip, how they want to make it unlivable, how they want to use the Gaza Strip as a buffer zone to provide space between Israel and Palestinians? Maybe we should believe people when they tell us who they are. But no, we're gonna go ahead and pretend like we don't see what we're seeing, we don't hear what we're hearing, and we don't read what we're reading. But let me give you more. Anyone who dares speak out against what Israel is carrying out is deemed anti-Semitic. We've heard it over and over again. In fact, the UN is the latest agency to be referred to as anti-Semitic, or an international organization of various countries. The only two major countries that continue to support Israel at this moment are the United States and the UK. Every other major country on the world stage wants a ceasefire, has voted for a ceasefire. But the US and the UK continues to provide cover for Israel. So for instance, last week, the UN Security Council called for speeding up humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza following reports that at least a quarter of Gazans are starving and now dying under Israel's siege. By the way, what do you call that? When you intentionally starve an entire population of people, when you engage in the collective punishment of an entire population of people, what is that called exactly? Oh, is this just war? Is that what this is? Just war. This is just war, it's just collateral damage. Intentionally starving people to death, denying them water so they can stay alive. What is that called? Just curious. Israel continues to severely limit food, water, fuel, medicine, and other supplies entering the region. The UN Security Council called that out. And so as a result, the UN Security Council, the UN overall, they're not supporters of Israel, they're anti-Semitic, they're Jew haters, right? Israel said it would no longer grant automatic visas to UN employees and accused the world body of being complicit partners in Hamas's tactics. Government spokesman Elon Levy said Israel would consider visa requests case by case that could further limit aid efforts in Gaza. Oh, I'm sure that's not intentional at all. And I'm also sure it's not intentional that they are not allowing journalists into the region so they can corroborate and verify some of the claims being made. I'm sure that's all a mistake, that's all an accident. Palestinian bodies are now, in some cases, impossible to even identify, and they're being thrown into mass graves. Here is one example.
Israeli authorities have handed over the bodies of approximately 80 people through the Karam Abu Salim crossing. These are people who were arrested and kidnapped in Gaza City and northern Gaza. So far, we don't know their names or the total number. However, it is estimated there are 80 people. This truck just entered the Karam Abu Salim crossing, southeast of Rafah. It is now headed towards the Abu Yusuf al-Najjar hospital, and the bodies will be examined to identify the people if possible. As you can see, this truck is arriving now and is carrying the bodies of those people. This is the first time bodies have been handed over to the Palestinian side through the official border crossing for identification and burial processes here in Gaza.
Now, for anyone who feels that Al Jazeera is too biased to trust their reporting, same report by CBS News this morning, by CNN, by American media, that has actually been incredibly friendly to Israel, especially in previous wars with the Palestinians. But in this case, the evidence is mounting. The footage from the Gaza Strip is impossible to deny. And even the friendly corporate media news outlets have no choice but to be honest about what we are seeing on the ground in the Gaza Strip. And let's not forget about the fact that this is in fact now already dragging us into a broader war in the region. In fact, things became even more intense over the weekend. I want to get to the details about this expansion. So Israel launched airstrikes in Damascus, Syria, and here are some more details on why they did that and what this could lead to.
Iran vows that Israel will pay the price after the death of a major Iranian official in an airstrike in Syria. NPS Tayyip has more.
The funeral of Sayed Razi Mousavi was led by the Syrian military. One of Iran's top advisors to its Revolutionary Guard, he was killed in an Israeli airstrike in a Damascus neighborhood on Monday. Tehran vowed revenge for Mousavi's killing amid growing fears the Israel-Hamas war could engulf the region.
So they're carrying out airstrikes in Syria. They're taking out military leaders from Iran in other countries, in Syria in this case. That's leading to Iran saying that they will in fact retaliate. Gee, I wonder if this is going to expand into a broader war. If things are already unstable and will be further destabilized in that region as a result of Israel's belligerence. And yes, I use that word clearly and accurately, belligerence. They do not care about the deaths of innocent civilians. That is riling up people in the Arab world for good reason. How can anyone watch what's happening and feel that it's okay and justified? As a result, you have militant groups retaliating, whether you're talking about the Houthi rebels or other Iran-backed militias like Hezbollah. And the United States, of course, is gonna get dragged into it. The United States has already been dragged into it. So my question to you is, are we okay with sacrificing our brave men and women in the military to fight Israel's wars? I'm not okay with that. And I really think that we should take a moment to consider all the issues we have in our own country, all of the issues we have within our own military, where we abandon our own military veterans when they need healthcare, when they need mental health care. Does it really make sense for us to exert ourselves and our resources to fight Israel's battles and Israel's wars as their far right-wing government continues with its belligerence? Really take a moment to ask yourself that. And as you do that, consider the fact that we already have soldiers who have been severely wounded as a result of engaging in Israel's war on Israel's behalf. I'll tell you how. So the United States has launched airstrikes against Iran-backed militias in Iraq. You thought we were done with Iraq, right? We're not done with Iraq. It took Israel to drag us right back in. Let's watch.
Since the outbreak of the war, Iran-backed groups in Syria, Iraq and Yemen have launched a slew of attacks on US and allied forces. On Monday, militias conducted a drone attack on Erbil Air Base, wounding 3 US service members, 1 critically. In response, Washington said it struck 3 sites used by pro-Iran groups.
While we do not seek to escalate conflict in the region, we are committed and fully prepared to take further necessary measures to protect our people and our facilities.
The Iran-backed Kateb Hezbollah makes up part of the Hashd al-Shaabi, a coalition of former paramilitary forces now integrated into Iraq's regular army. The Iraqi government hit back at the American strikes, saying this step harms bilateral relations between the two countries, and above all, it represents an unacceptable violation of Iraqi sovereignty.
What are we doing? What are we doing? Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin claiming that we are gonna do whatever it takes to protect our people and our facilities is a complete joke. It's a joke. Because if he were serious about that, and if the United States government, under the leadership of the very weak and pathetic Joe Biden, were serious about that, then they would stop assisting Israel in its belligerence. They would stop providing the weaponry and the funding for Israel to carry out their barbaric acts in the Gaza Strip. But they're not doing that, are they? Oh, don't worry, Biden's wagging his finger. Hey, Netanyahu, please, please, please be a little better, please. Pathetic, embarrassing. We are a laughingstock on the international stage. Absolutely embarrassing. And to sacrifice members of our own military to do this, to destabilize the region on behalf of Israel, I think is incredibly shameful, especially since we're doing it on behalf of a government that is led by a man who propped up Hamas, who funded Hamas, who consistently brags about how he prevented the formation of a Palestinian state. Benjamin Netanyahu did all of that. And we are spending our resources and sacrificing our soldiers on behalf of that government. No thanks.